The chair of the FTC speaking at the Global Privacy Summit today. This event taking place just as Politico and others report that Facebook and the FTC are negotiating a settlement which would require new oversights for the social media giant. Now, that could have a dramatic impact on Mark Zuckerberg's power at the company. With us now to dig deeper is Politico's technology reporter who broke this story, Nancy Scola, along with Radia, an adjunct fellow for CEI, which is a lobbying group promoting limited regulation. Welcome to you both. Nancy, I'll just ask you, what curbs to Zuckerberg's power are we talking about?
So the plan that we're reporting on is a three-part plan in terms of a new governance structure being installed in Facebook potentially if the plan is agreed to. So the three parts of that are a new privacy assessor, they're calling it, who would have sort of oversight of how the company handles their privacy policies at a very high sort of C-suite level. There would also be a committee installed within Facebook at the board level that would also have oversight over their privacy practices. And then there would be the creation of a designated compliance officer inside Facebook. That would be Zuckerberg, is the proposal on the table. And he would be personally responsible for, again, complying with the good privacy practices within Facebook.
Ryan, do you think these are appropriate steps? Do they go far enough? Do they go too far?
Well, these steps that Nancy's reporting has revealed would come in addition to the $3 to $5 billion civil penalty that Facebook is expected to face based on a violation of a consent decree that it reached with the Federal Trade Commission back in 2011. This sort of monitoring and specificity in terms of how the company has to address privacy would be a pretty unprecedented change in terms of the degree to which the regulator is getting into the business of how a company polices privacy. If this is the future of how the FTC will intervene in this space, it could signal vigorous enforcement to come and really marks a major change in the agency's approach.
Nancy, are you surprised that Mark Zuckerberg is going to be the head of this committee? And I understand the committee is independent, but would it be better, perhaps, in terms of having checks and balances for this committee to entirely be independent and not have Mark Zuckerberg a part of it?
So to be clear, the committee is actually separate from Mark Zuckerberg's leadership. It's a sort of a separate entity within the company. Zuckerberg would be an officer that they would be sort of reporting to in some ways while reporting to the board. The privacy assessor, it's important to keep in mind, is that would actually have to be approved by the Federal Trade Commission. So they would have some ability to say, hey, the company has chosen someone to work in that oversight role and that person's not acceptable to us. So the sort of Zuckerberg's inclusion in that power structure is important in that there are added responsibilities being placed on him rather than there's sort of additional powers being placed on him.
Ryan, it just all makes me think that it entrenches Facebook in a way as part of our bureaucracy. I don't know how else to put it. In other words, what does this mean for, let's say, competitors or upstarts? Or is it just going to be a long period, frankly, of us working out what regulation and best practices look like for a brand new industry?
It's certainly a sign that the social media world is maturing. A notable example of where the government began to get involved with a major private company is back when the Microsoft antitrust settlement was reached. It ultimately involved ongoing monitoring of Microsoft's practices. This may reflect the wisdom that Facebook's power is here to stay. Of course, it may also mean that if other companies make mistakes or perceived mistakes, they could face similarly strict governmental scrutiny. Now, what it means for the future of innovation on Facebook is less clear, but it certainly will make the company a lot more risk-averse going forward, which may have positive privacy implications, but may not be all great for consumers.
Scrutiny is different, though, than having a federally approved person inside a company, Nancy. I mean, is there precedent for this? And should companies in general be concerned that the federal government is exerting themselves into the corporate offices around potentially around the country if this is some sort of a precedent?
So two things. One, I want to make clear that this is a proposed plan on the table. It hasn't been agreed to fully by either side. There is some precedent. I think Boeing has had some arrangement with the federal government with sort of working with kind of regulatory people that have regulatory responsibilities sort of placed within inside the company. But I think it reflects, Ryan sort of mentioned this, the idea that regulators are kind of trying to figure out how to police these industries that arguably for a long time they just took a very hands-off approach. So they're trying to be creative about, Ryan mentioned this financial penalty. It's $5 billion, which is a lot of money, but to Facebook, it's not a great deal of money. So they're trying to be creative about finding ways to really kind of keep these companies in check if money alone isn't going to do it.
But there's no way. I mean, I understand and I applaud regulators for trying to be creative when it comes to solving this problem. But there's no way to do this, is there, in scale? I mean, Ryan, if you take a look across the industry, if every company is going to have some sort of data issue or privacy concern, or if, let's say there's a dozen companies out there, are there going to be federally approved officials at dozens of companies?
So there are already a lot of consent decrees with most major tech companies and the Federal Trade Commission. So each time a new privacy violation emerges, it's possible the FTC will use its existing powers, which are already quite broad, to seek to achieve something similar to what it looks like it's exploring through Facebook. So even without any additional privacy legislation, the FTC may be able to engage in a company-by-company privacy regulatory scheme using something along the lines of what is being proposed here.
Bottom line, Ryan, do you think this makes Facebook less powerful or more so?
I think it's a sign that the relationship between the company and the government may ultimately become closer. So even though it may seem like it's making Facebook less powerful, it may actually suggest, as you mentioned, that Facebook is becoming entrenched.
All right. Guys, thanks very much. A lot to think about. Ryan, Radia, Nancy Scola, and Facebook shares down about 0.5% today.